how to watch YouTube on one of these. Alright, so I'll start off with this very stereotypical looking 1970s TV. Particularly, this one is a 1977 Quasar. And what you have on this Quasar for inputs on the back is a bunch of screws. Yep, that's how a lot of 1970s TVs were. And composite video had been around for a while, and I'm assuming most people are at least somewhat familiar with what composite video is. But it wasn't until right around the late 80s when composite video became basically ubiquitous on TVs. So what those screws are is they're an RF antenna input. So typically back then, you wouldn't be connecting much of anything to one of these TVs other than a literal antenna. Although a VCR was common as well, but you'd use coaxial most of the time for VCR, but coaxial wasn't included on all TVs. I don't know, it's weird. So what you'll need to go from composite to RF is an RF modulator, such as this one right here. It's got a composite input, and it's got an RF output labeled to TV. But you'll notice the RF output is in fact coaxial. So that makes this require a little more work. And there are a few options in this case. The first option is you could buy or make a coaxial to screw-on spade terminal cable. I definitely bought this and didn't make it in 5 minutes. Or another funny thing you could do is attach an antenna to this and bring that near the antenna of the TV. That would work too. Might not work quite as well though. And keep in mind when attaching the screw terminals, you want to put it onto the ones labeled VHF. Most of the time at least. Now that the spade terminals are attached, you can screw in the coaxial. I would also highly recommend actually plugging in your RF modulator if it needs power. Because if something's not plugged in, it won't turn on. Wow! Plug in the composite. And the composite will go into an HDMI to composite adapter. You could get these for like $5 on eBay. So now I have to plug your HDMI source into the HDMI to composite adapter. So my HDMI source is an old Apple TV that I'm currently AirPlaying to. So I just grab the adapter and plug the HDMI in. And would you look at that? Nothing is on the screen. And that's to be expected most of the time because you have to tune into your video. Basically, what the RF modulator is a tiny little TV station that can broadcast typically onto channels 3 and 4 on the VHF band. So it'll usually have a selector that allows you to choose between channels 3 and 4. I have it set to channel 4. Here you'll see the VHF band, channel 6. VHF band is the one that has less numbers. UHF has a ton of numbers. So just tune into 4, and would you look at that? We have YouTube. And what ends up being really funny is just being able to look at this 1970s TV and scroll through the YouTube searches. Here's a video of some guy making a flat screen TV not much of a TV anymore.
Alright, 3, 2, 1, fire in the hole. Better?
By the way, the lag actually has nothing to do with the TV. It's my Wi-Fi not being compliant with my Apple TV. Nothing to do with this thing. On most CRTs from the late 80s onwards, it typically had composite video inputs. These circle things, which I think most people are probably familiar with. The white, red, and yellow cables. So you plug the cable into the TV. On a lot of smaller TVs, you won't even have to plug in the red cable because the TV just has one speaker, so no stereo. And then you'll need one adapter. Get one of these on eBay. It's a HDMI to composite adapter. It turns modern HDMI input into a composite video output. So plug the adapter in. For the HDMI source, I'm using an Apple TV that I'm AirPlaying to. So then just plug the HDMI in. And boom. YouTube in its highest quality. And the final alternative I'll talk about today. A VHF UHF gain amplifier. This is basically going to work on the same principle as the RF modulator, especially in the sense that it's going to still use the RF modulator. What this does is takes the signal from the modulator and makes it stronger. Effectively, you're making a small TV station. Just plug, or I guess screw an antenna into the output. Doesn't need to be a big one. Big one will give you more coverage. Small one if you're just broadcasting to your room. Do not make this setup too powerful. Do not. Make sure it does not go outside your house. I guess onto your lawn is fine, but make sure to keep the signal weak enough, because otherwise the FCC might not be happy. I forgot to mention, you want to, from the modulator, take the output, take a double-sided coaxial cable, connect it from the output of the modulator onto the input of the RF amplifier. So now just take the composite from the adapter, plug it into the modulator. The cables do not end up being messy whatsoever. But on the other hand, grab the antenna and put it somewhere, and all your TVs are suddenly broadcasting your HDMI signal. Of course, apart from YouTube, any other HDMI output from your device will work. And pretty much, you're just using the old TV as a monitor. Now, of course, with RF, the problem is the quality might be quite a bit worse, especially through an antenna. So I always recommend try to plug in the most direct signal. But some TVs won't have a plug, and even if they do, transmitting a TV signal through an antenna is kind of a fun thing to do. So anyhow, thank you for watching. Goodbye.